Hello everyone, welcome to SkillWisdom. Please subscribe our channel and press on bell button to get the latest updates on new videos. You can also follow our Facebook page or you can join our Telegram group to get updates on new videos and latest technologies. So this video we are covering basics of class and object. So I have just created two classes here. So if you don't know how to create a classes in Eclipse, please go through our previous video where we have covered how to create class, package, and Java project. So as I mentioned earlier, so class is just a blueprint of stage and behavior. Stage indicates variable, whereas behavior indicates function. I have just added one variable called I, then I have added one function called display, and I'm just printing some message. Okay, so at this point, this is just a line of a codes on your paper. There is no memory allocated for it. When memory will allocate? When you run your program, when user loads this class to a memory, then only memory will be allocated. How to load this one? Let's assume that I wanted to use this I and display function outside this class A. So outside this class A. So that means this is a class A, right? Now in main class, I wanted to use this I and display. How I can do it? As you all know, Java program starts with main function. So I'm creating a function here, main. So if I want to access this class A, first I need to create a variable for it. I have created variable. So left side, this is first part is called data type, and this is a name. And right side, new I used. This is a keyword, and this is something called class name, right? So whenever you use new keyword, so what happens is Java will load the class, whatever you mentioned on right side of that new keyword into a memory. It will allocate some memory for this class. So once you create object, using that object, you can always access members of that class. There are some restriction on what members you can access, what members you cannot access. So that will cover it later. But at this point, just understand, once you create an object, you should be able to access members of that class. So if you want to access I now, so what we need to do is just use a object dot I. So you should be able to access I from class A. Suppose if you want to access display function, then just use object dot display. Then you should be able to access display function. So let's run this program. You can see here display function is called, right? So now you may have a question, what is this class A? So this is called constructor. Constructor is a method in a class whose name is same as your class name. And constructor don't have any return type. You can observe display here. We have return type called void here, but in constructor, we don't have anything. So whenever you create any class, usually this constructor will be provided by JRE, which is in a hidden mode. Nobody can see it, but user have a control to create their own constructor that we will see in coming videos. So in this constructor, I'm just printing a message here. So let's run this program again. Okay. You can see now, whenever line number 7 hits, it is calling constructor. So that time, the message inside the constructor is displaying. Then we are calling display function. So we are getting a display function message. Understand what is constructor? Constructor is a special method whose name is same as your class name, and constructor don't have any return types. The main task of this constructor is to initialize the class. Initialization. It construct the class, right? So if you want to understand in a simple word, let's consider that you are building a house, right? What you will do? First, you will go to architect and you will prepare the blueprint, right? So that blueprint is called class. At this point, your house does not exist. Just it's a blueprint. You are visualizing how your house should look. When house will be ready? When you build it, when you construct it. That process is called object creation. Okay. So if you want to access any members from different class, how we did? We have created an object. Then we used dot function to access those members, right? So there is one special keyword in Java that is called static. You can use that keyword with any member of your class. That might be variable or that might be your function. So the only difference with this static is at this point, just understand, let's say I will make it as a static member. You can see I just put a static here. Right? So when I make any member as a static, this member you can access using a object. So line number 7, I have created an object. Then I used object.I. This is valid thing you can access. Along with that, we can also access static member using just by class name. No need to create an object. This static member you can also access using just a class name. You can always make your function also as a static. If you want to access your function, static function, then you can always use class name dot function name. Let's run this program. You can see this display is also calling the same display, and whereas class name dot display is also calling the same display. Okay. Next one is variable type. Based on scope of a variable in Java, the variables are categorized into three types. One is local variable, instance variable, and other one is class variable. Let's go in deep to understand what is these variables, what is local and what is instance and what is class variable. I'm just retaking the same previous example where I have a class A which is having two members, one is int I, other one is display, and left side I have a other class called main class, and I have a main function. So if I want to access I and display from class A, so I used to do, I used to create an object and access it. So basically these three variables are categorized based on the memory allocation and scope of this variables. Scope means the life of this variable. Okay, so let's consider two types of a memory blocks. One is stack and other one is heap. So if I want to access I and display now, what I need to do, I need to create object of it. Let's create object of class A. So I have created an object now. So once I create an object, so if I want to access I now, as soon as you create an object, usually what happens is it will create this obj reference variable into your stack, and it will load this class into heap, and that will build a connection between this stack and heap. See now, so it will load class into heap where you will have I and display, and it will create a reference variable in stack, and it will build the connection between these two. Now if I want to access I, when I say obj.I, so it will go to this obj.I, and I wanted to store 10 here, right? So 10 will be stored here. Then I'm creating one more object here, obj1. So now what happens? It will create one more memory in heap for that same class. Then it will create one more reference in stack, that is obj1, and it will build a connection between obj1 and new memory. So now what I will do, obj1.I equal to 20. So now obj1 where it is, this one is a obj1, right? So I means this one, obj1.I, so here it will store 20, right? You can see here this I is 20 and this I is 10 here. So let's try to print this too. So I'm just trying to print these two, obj.I, obj. Let's run this program. You can see here obj.I is 10, that is obj.I is 10 and obj1.I is 20. All right. This is called instance variable because now if you see this I have a separate memory for each of its instance. Each of class instance have a different memory for this I. That's why this I is called instance variable. So let's consider this display function. If I have any variable inside this display function, let's say int I equal to k. This is called local variable because the scope of this variable is only between these two curly braces. That is called block. Outside this block, you cannot access this k. So that's why this is called local variable. Then you may have a question, what is this class variable? We have seen something called static variable, right? Let's create one variable in a class A, that is static int I equal to j. So along with these two memory block stack and heap, there is one more block that is called class area, right? So whenever you create any static member, that memory will be allocated in this class area. Okay, let's try to initialize this I now using obj dot I stored it as 100. So this obj dot I will points to this j and you will store 100. So now the twist comes, we have one more object called obj1, right? The idea behind this static member is all the instance should share same memory location. Right? Now obj1 is pointing here, right? obj is pointing to here, right? obj1 should also point to the same memory location. When I say obj1.j, then it will also point to the same memory location. Now what it will do, previously j equal to 100, now j becomes 200, right? So now, as I said, you can also access this static member using a class name, right? Let's try that. When I do class a dot j equal to 300, so it will again override in the same memory. That means all instances of a class are pointing to the same memory. If one is updated, the result will be reflecting to all the objects, right? Let's try to print it. I'm trying to print obj.I and obj1.I and class1 dot class a dot j. Let's execute this one. You can see 300, 300, 300. So this variable is called class variable because the memory for this will be common for all the instances of that class. Clear? Clear the difference between instance and class variable and what is the use of using static keyword? Let's create a class A. So now I'm creating a variable called I. Then I'm creating one more variable called J, which is a static member. Let's create one function, non-static method, because I haven't used any static here. Just I named it as a non-static member. And I'm creating one more method that is a static method. So in non-static method, here there's no static keyword here, right? So I'm trying to assign I equal to 10 and j equal to 20. So the ground rule is any non-static method can able to access your static members and also non-static members. But whereas it comes to the static methods will allow only this access to the static members. Here you cannot access I, but you can only access J here. You can see here we got an error message. So accessing non-static members inside a static method is not possible, but you can access static member inside static method, and non-static method can access both static as well as non-static. Clear? Let's go to the new example. I have a class A. I'm just creating a constructor. Then I'm adding some message. And there is something called a block in Java. So block means just opening and closing braces. This is called regular blocks. I'm just printing some message here. And similar like regular block, we have something called static blocks, which will start with static keyword. And here also I'm printing some message. Okay. Usually these blocks are used to initialize variables in Java. That will cover later how and why these blocks are required. Okay. On left side, I'm just creating a main function, and I'm creating a series of object 1, 2, 3. Three objects I'm creating for a class A. Okay. So now we'll see how this will execute. Okay. So when I run this program first time, when it will hit the line number 8, that is when I try to create an object first time for any class, at this point your class will be loading first time, right? Whenever your class will load first time, the first it will try to execute your static block. If there is no static block, it won't execute. But if there is a static block in your class, so first it will try to execute static block. Once it will execute the static block, then it will check, is there anything there in normal block, that is regular block. If it is there, then it will execute your regular block. After the regular block, it will execute the constructor. This is an execution order. First it will execute static, second it will execute regular, then third it will execute your constructor. So when you try to create object second time, then what happens is this static block will not execute. Static block will execute only once when you create object first time. After that, it will never execute. After that, only regular block will execute, then your constructor will execute. Third time, again regular block, then constructor. Let's run this program. You can see here, static block called, regular block, regular, constructor, regular, constructor. Clear how these blocks will be executing now. So we'll go in detailed with respect to a function, right? So I'm just going to a class A and I'm creating some function here. So this is a function. Usually function means what? Set of instruction blocked together and you have given some name for it. So whenever you call this function, basically it used to do all those line of a code what you have written inside this block. That is called function. So whenever you create a function, you will have four things. One is a body of a function, other one is name, then we call it as a parameter. If you need anything to execute your function, that we pass it as a parameter. We'll see that in coming videos. Next one is return type. If your function is not returning anything, that is called void. Void indicates we are not returning anything from this function. That means when you execute this function, you are not getting anything back. Whatever you have written, that will be executed, but you are not getting anything back, right? So let's try to create object of it and try to call display. When your function is not returning anything, there is no necessity for using any variable or assignment operator left side. Just I'm calling that function, right? If you try to use any variable on left side, then it will throw an error message saying this function is not returning you anything, but you are trying to store something on a variable called int. So this is not allowed when function is not returning anything, right? Second one, assume that if your function is returning something, let's say display function, it is returning int. Whenever your function says that it is returning something, so the last line of your function should be a return statement and it has to return some value which matches the data type what you given on your function. So I have given int here. That's why I'm returning some integer value here. So you can call this kind of a function using object dot function name. It's fair enough. It will allow. Along with this, you can also call this function and assign the value to some variable. Here, the variable type should always equals to the function return type. Okay. So if it is not equals, then probably we'll get compile time error. Right. There are something which will do auto casting that we'll check it later. But if there is no auto casting, if these two are not matching, then at this point, just think that if these two are not matching, then it will throw compile time exception. This is not allowed.